This exercise, called the date calculations exercise, lets us work with some of those advanced techniques that we covered in class. So we have importing text files into spreadsheets. We have using date calculations, which is kind of mind-bending, but same as any other calculation we've done so far, so nothing magic. It's just a way of thinking about dates. They're just numbers. And conditional formatting to let us quickly highlight results much faster than just looking at a raw table of numbers. If we put some color, some spice to our numbers, it makes it much easier to identify what's going on just by looking at it. So it's a great addition to regular formatting. Now to start, we start off with the text file, Dawson City Breakup History.txt, which has the dates of all of the date for each year that the ice broke up on the river in Dawson. It's a text file, so we need to use the text import wizard. So we'll start here in Excel. I'll go to the file, the backstage, and I'll say open. And my file that I have, the text file, happens to be on the desktop. Now I don't see it here, and the reason is by default, we look at right here, Excel only tries to look for its own files, .xlsx or older versions .xls, and there are some other files that it looks for. So we need to tell it look for all files, and that'll always be the very top entry on this very long list. And it will find all the files, and there it is, Dawson City Breakup History.txt. So I say open. It won't open up immediately into Excel because it's a text file, so we need to tell it a bit of information. And the first, so we go through the text import wizard. Remember, a wizard is a step-by-step going through a complicated procedure. This one's not that complicated. But in the first step it says, choose the file type that best describes your data, delimited or fixed width. Normally this guesses right. It'll guess if your file is delimited using commas for CSV files or tab for tab delimited files, but in this case it's guessed wrong. This is a fixed width file. The columns are all nicely lined up just with spaces. It's a very simple file, but still fixed width. If you get it wrong, close down and you continue through the text import wizard. Just close down the Excel workbook, start over again, because that's the easiest way to fix it. Okay, fixed width. I'll click next, and now then step 2, it'll guess, okay, where are the columns? It guesses one's over here with the years, and one's over here with what we're going to call the Julian dates of the ice, the river breakup. I'll click next. In our case, we don't have any dates of the form year, month, day, day, month, day, year, and so forth, so we don't have to put any extra information here. We do have years, but there's no ambiguity about what year I'm talking about when I say 1900. That's year 1900. So I'll say finish. And there we go. If I did things right, I have a column of numbers in column A, a column of numbers in column B, which I can adjust the widths of, just as before. And I move on to step 2, which is insert some column headings, because those weren't in the file. So I'll just right-click here, choose Insert, and we want to call this one Year, and this one Julian Date. And why not make them bold? I'll select the whole row just by clicking on row 1, click the bold button, and then maybe I'll resize A and B so they're just as big as they need to be. But now I have the year, the Julian date, all the way down to, what's the last year? 2006. So now it asks me to add a new column called calculated date. Notice this isn't bold because I made the whole row 1 bold. Just make the column wide enough. And in here, we need to figure out the actual number that corresponds to the date that this breakup happened. It happened on the 129th day of 1900. Well, what day of the year was that of 1900? I'm not sure, so I'm just going to say equals whatever's in B2. I could just type 129, but I'm lazy, so I'll just type equals B2. So 129. What I can do, though, is format this whole column. I'll right-click, format cells. Actually, I won't right-click. Instead, I'll just, from the number formatting ribbon group, I'll choose long date. That's a convenient way of getting there. You can also right-click and go through the format, but this is a little bit more convenient. And it says, okay, the 129th day of 1900 was Tuesday, May 8th. And I know that was correct because January 1st was the first, January 1st, 1900 was the beginning of time for as far as Excel is concerned. So all I needed was this. But for the next year, I can't do a simpler calculation. It's the 134th day of 1901. Well, 1901 happened 365, and if you want to get fancy, 365 and a quarter days after January 1st, 1900. So I need to add in 365, and then I need to add in my 134 to get to that day of 1901. For 1902, I need to find out how many years have elapsed, 1, 2, back to 1900. Each of those is 365.25 days, plus the 131. So, can I come up with a formula that does that? In 1902, I need 2 years. In 1901, I need 1 year. In 1905, I would need 5 years. And you start to see a pattern. It's just whatever the year is minus 1900. So let's try that. And I should be able to do it for the first one because 0 years have elapsed. So this will still work for 1900. So I'm going to start a new formula. And I'm going to put in parentheses whatever the year is minus 1900. So that just by itself, if I just hit enter, of course it's formatted as a date, so let me just turn that back into a number. 0. That's perfectly understandable. If I do a little autofill down for a few fields, I see 1, 2, 3, so I'm on the right track. In 1904, that's 4 years have elapsed. In 1900, 0 years have elapsed, so that's good. I'm on the right track. Each one of those years is worth 365.25 days. So I've got to multiply however many years have elapsed times 365.25, and then I just throw onto the top of the file, I add on whatever the Julian date is, and of course that's in column B. So 129. Now I've not formatted this as dates to see what happens. So after 2 years, after 1 year, 3 and 490. See, each number is getting bigger and bigger because we have whole years full of dates that are getting added to. So I'll just select that entire column and I'll reformat it again as long dates as I wanted. And so the ice broke up in 1901 on May 13th, in 1905 on May 9th, according to my simple calculation. Now I can just fill it in for the rest of the years that we have here, down to 2006. Notice those hash marks. Whenever you see the hash marks in Excel, your column's just not wide enough. It's not a mistake. Just make the column wider. And auto-fitting it is the easiest way to do that. Now it gives us a couple of checks. It says on May 2nd, the ice broke up on May 2nd in 1979. Let's see what we have in 1979. May 1st, I'm off by a day. And in 1987, it says the ice broke up on May 9th. 1987, sorry. And I have May 8th. So I'm off by a day. So apparently my little calculation is close, but I need to fudge it a bit. For whatever reason, I'm off by 1. So let's not worry about why that might be. But let's just add in plus 1 to my formula. So I corrected the first one, and now I've got to autofill again to make sure that all the other rows get the same formula. The further you drag down, the faster you go. And now we can double check. In 1979, it should be May 2nd, and it is. In 1987, it should be May 9th. And there it is, May 9th. Okay, so we're doing better. But we can do even better. I'm going to choose the actual date. It's asked me to put a new column called actual date. And for this one, we're just going to use actually Excel's built-in function, date. It's just called date. So it's a function. It starts with a formula, of course, always with the equal sign. Date. I open my parentheses, and it gives me hints about what's going to go on. The first argument is year, then I put a comma, then the second argument is month, and that'll be 1 through 12. And then the third argument is day, and that will be 1 through 31. Not for all day of months, but we can see we'll bend that rule slightly when we do it. Okay, the year, that's easy. That's in column A, so A2. The month, it suggests that we always just use January, and that's month 1. Now for the day of the month, we use the Julian date. And this is kind of bizarre. This is cheating a little bit in some ways, I guess, because we're saying the 129th day of January. But it turns out Excel doesn't care. It'll still calculate what we're doing. And because I use the date function, it actually will automatically format that cell using one of the date formats, not the one I particularly care for, or that I want to use in this example. That's the European style. day, month, or year, month, day, which is my favorite actually, but we'll go for long date. And notice it's a little bit different than what we had before. So let's autofill down and just see what's going on. There we go. Not wide enough. Make it a little wider. Scroll back up to the top, or remember, Control Home will send you right back to cell A1, like so. So if you don't like scrolling, that's the easy way to do it. Notice that the actual date with the date function, it knows about leap years. It's a little bit smarter than our calculated date, and it says, name 1901, not a leap year, 1902, not a leap year, 1903, not a leap year. We got the same results. But in the leap years, we're slightly off. Our calculated date was not quite right, and that's because it doesn't know about leap years entirely. We just took a guess. We said a year was 365.25 days long. But it's not that simple. In leap years, we have an extra day in February, and so we should be subtracting 1 from every time we have a leap year to get from May down to May 7th. But our formula wasn't that fancy, so we won't worry about that. But instead, we'll see if we ever want to do this in the future, we'll probably use the date function. It's more accurate, even though we don't know what the day of the month is, or the month. We just said it was January, in this case, January 128th. It'll figure it out, as long as we format it as a date. And our last job is to take the Julian date, which is a simple number, and doesn't include any year information, and we're just going to take that whole column and add some conditional formatting so that we can see what are the warm years, what are the cold years. A warm year would be one where the Julian date is a low number because the ice broke up earlier. A cold year would be where the Julian date is higher because the ice took longer to break up. So I can apply it just to the range. I can select my range all the way down to year 2006, or I can just, conditional formatting is smart enough to know I only really want to format cells that have numbers or formulas in them. So it's not going to format Julian date or any of the blank cells that follow after 2006. So I'll just select the entire column by clicking on column B, go to conditional formatting, and it asks us to use color scales, probably a blue and a red, sort of signifying cold and warm. And the first one is right, meaning that higher numbers should be blue and lower numbers should be red. If you go the other way, it will reverse it and show lower numbers as red. Sorry, lower numbers as blue. So I'll pick this one here. But of course there are other options, but blue and red seems like a good color scheme for cold and hot. Faucet Tap certainly used that system. So I'll click this one, and we'll see that what it does is it picks it automatically picks the highest value and the lowest value. The highest value is the coldest year, so it'll just give that the darkest blue. The lowest value is the warmest year, it'll give us the darkest red. And then it'll figure out the graduated shades in between the highest and the lowest. And in the middle, it'll be approximately white. So 131, that's pretty close to the average, I assume, because it's very white looking. 128, 130, those are all near the middle, so they hardly have any color. But then we go down, 119, that was a very warm year that year, in 1940. There's a very cool year, 1964. But as we scroll down, we see that more and more years are red. And in the last 20 years or so, or even more, 30 years, we're seeing more red and very little blue, which means apparently things are sort of starting to get warmer. So there's our date calculations exercise, a little bit of everything tossed into a pile. And that's it. See you next time.